Hi, and welcome to What the Phalange, the podcast where we watch every episode of Friends, discuss it, deconstruct it, and fan over it, one episode at a time.
My name is Emilie, pronouns she and her.
And my name is Quinn, pronouns zizier or they, them.
This week we are talking about Season 2, Episode 5, the one with 5 steaks and an eggplant, a line that is actually said in the episode. This episode aired on October 19th, 1995. It was written by, definitely a man, because you can tell, Chris Brown, and it was directed by Ellen Gittleson. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
This is the one... I think it was all right. Yeah. All right. This is the one, according to IMDb, when the gang is divided by income issues. Monica, Ross, and Chandler make more money, while Rachel, Phoebe, and Joey don't. Chandler also uses a case of mistaken identity to his advantage, which is like a fucking understatement.
I know, this IMDb...
Excuse the language so soon.
This summary is so, PG. It's oh, so gentle of Chandler. Anyways, in our opinion, this is also the one where things get real rapey and real classist real fast.
First of all, first impressions of the episode. Go.
I would argue this is one of the worst episodes of Friends in terms of, storyline, in the sense that, first of all, the Chandler storyline is just brutal. It's just awful, and there's, no redemption to it, except for, the script is, his lines are good. Chandler's lines, his dialogue is good. But outside of that, that's just a shit show, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But I also while I appreciate what they were trying to do with the whole discussion of finances, they actually don't ever conclude anything at the end of it. They don't resolve it. They don't actually have a real conversation. It's Monica gets fired, and therefore now there won't be an imbalance of power when it comes to finances. It just it doesn't actually make any sense, and it's just not spoiler alert, it just doesn't come back in the next episode. It's not it's an ongoing arc about finances. It's just, it kind of feels like they had the right ingredients and just didn't do something good enough with it,
yeah it's interesting because it's a very interesting talking point, and I think it makes the episode interesting because it's a very relatable concept, and totally. What they end up portraying is at certain moments I feel the feeling that I've had being in those moments of Monica and Chandler and Joey and Rachel and Phoebe, I've had those, I can feel it when I watch it, but you're right. There is no conclusiveness to it. And so I kind of actually, one of the three main things that I want to talk about this episode was how to navigate the wage gap with your friends and in different relationships, because I feel it's a great springboard to have that conversation. And I feel it's just something that has to be navigated, especially at our age, late 20s, early 30s. This is a very real thing. At any age it is, but I think especially, at this point as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, do you want to transition to say the other things that you want to talk about too? Because I feel we're likely going to have some overlap.
Yeah, I feel to be honest, I feel there was so much in this episode. Okay, again, I feel I've pointed this out in the past. I feel there's a pattern in Friends where it kind of goes back and forth, where it's we're one episode, it's it's not super loaded, but then next episode, it's super loaded. And I feel this is the episode where it's super loaded.
Okay,
But okay, one of the things I want to talk about is... It's a very passing thing near the end of the episode, where little Stevie, there's kind of a comment about babysitters fooling around with his dad.
Mm-hmm.
And
I want to do the math on that when we get to it.
Yeah, sure. That's a good idea, actually. But like, I just feel like, and then in the next scene, it kind of implying Rachel possibly being one of them, or like just like puts that question out there. And I also, like, want to talk about like the patriarchy, just like femme folks, and again, kind of looping back to something we've talked about in the past, where it's like this need to be on guard in this world, and that being demonstrated by like Chandler, essentially,
Right.
And then I, of course, want to talk about another main thing that I want to talk about is the money, the wage gap, and finances with friends. And I don't think it has to be like a dark kind of topic. I mean, like, besides like the, capitalism is horrible part of it, but like it can be a fruitful conversation, in my opinion. Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have to go so horribly as it did between these friends, even though, yeah.
Well,
it can be a hard conversation to.
Depends on your friends.
Yeah, it depends on your friends, and it's just like it can be a hard conversation to breach because there is so much stigma around money and sharing, like what you make, and and that is one of the ways that the system controls us, guys. So let's get into that when we get there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I want to go now. My turn.
Go. Yes, please.
Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is like right away in this cold open, and like I don't actually have enough nuanced understanding of these topics in order for me to feel as though like I'm well versed in it enough to talk about it. So I will be likely reading a little bit from like anyways. Basically, I want to talk about little people and their portrayal in media. So specifically in the ways in which basically quote unquote midget wrestling is seen in this first scene of the episode. And so just for context, like the term that we will be using throughout this episode is little people and not the M word that I just used, just because this is what little people have asked to be called. And so we'll get to that like very shortly because it's in the cold open. But the next thing I want to talk about is specifically like negging pickup artists and consent. So a little bit like in the ways in which that all kind of ties in together. And then, I also want to talk about financial disparity and classism amongst friends, but specifically from the fact that Rachel actually comes from a lot of wealth and the ways in which like that script is kind of flipped. So I just want to talk about like that whole concept a little bit and capitalism. When do we ever not talk about capitalism in our podcast though?
Oh my God. Capitalism, the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Common themes.
Yep.
Okay. So
let's get into
opening scene. So like the entire show opens up with a picture of their TV. And before we like launch into deeper topics, I just want to point out the fact that the program is in Spanish, and it's just like every single time they're watching TV thus far in Friends, it has been in Spanish. Just so need to put that out there. Anyway, but more importantly, essentially we're watching what is called midget wrestling, or what Chandler refers to it as. Emily, I'm going to let you kind of take the reins on this.
And this is the same media portrayal that we see throughout many, many decades of little people on television. And so I will put it in the show notes, but I just want to pull like something up from Little People of America, which is an organization that was created by and is run by little people and their feelings around midget wrestling. So the first thing that they write on their website is midget wrestling is they use the word that here, so I will be just using the word that they are using. Midget wrestling is defined by marketing little people as an entertainment spectacle, just as little people were put on display based upon their physical differences during the days of the traditional sideshow and freak show. And so like they are recognizing that this is like their whole take on midget wrestling is like a campaign to stop midget wrestling. And then one of the messages they say is that some people argue this issue is about choice, which is interesting because the people who are choosing to be wrestlers like are making that choice, right? And I think that that's a big conversation about the ways in which we like just like the ways we just like show and entertain through, I'm trying to say words and they're not coming through, but like, you know, like when you see someone who is like a caricature of themselves on television and then people are like, well, they chose to do that. You know, like you see someone who is queer on television who's making fun of themselves as being queer and then they're like, okay, well, like they're just, you know, like they're choosing to act and be as that character. So like they should be able to do that. And it's like, sure, but that's not representative of like how it's like everyone feels, you know?
It's like within the entertainment industry, we need to make more space for little people to have jobs within the entertainment industry, doing different things. And then we can circle back around and have like a real conversation about choice. And I think that's kind of where it's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And I will link like a PDF of like a long I guess not study, but it's like an academic article written specifically about the portrayal of little people in media and specifically in the ways in which little people tend to be portrayed in 4 very specific ways. One being like evil and sinister style like portrayal, 2 being magical or mythical beings, 3 being the butt of a joke, and some form of like humor, which we can see in this episode of Friends, and 4 like being portrayed as I guess like freaks in the same way that like they are shown in circuses, but also specifically in the ways in which like reality TV shows portray like this voyeurism kind of style of watching little people, rather than actually giving little people like full backstories with like complex understandings. So anyways, we'll add those links to the show notes. And obviously, like if you are a little person listening to this episode, we would love if you wrote in and, you know, what the phalange, wtphalange@gmail.com and just told us how you feel about these things. And, you know, let us know. It would be great to have various opinions and thoughts around this matter. Yeah, so moving on, in the same cold open, there's just so much in this fucking cold open, it's unreal. But in this same cold open, so a phone starts to ring. First of all, I think it's like hilarious that Chandler's not picking up his phone. He's like, I don't want to pick up my phone. It's valid. I never pick up my phone. I always screen my calls. But then obviously it's someone calling named, is her name Jade? I feel like I wrote down Jade, but I'm not sure. Is it Jade? I think it's Jade.
You know what? I didn't even write down her name, but one of the notes that I wrote down was depiction of women. Being a 2-dimensional character.
It is Jade,
it's almost like she was more of like a prop, you know?
She was 100% a prop. Like,
yeah. It kind of feels like someone saw this character in a porn movie and was like, let's put this character into here. You know, it's like, it's more of a fantasy character than an actual, like, real person. But also, that being said, if you have ever done exactly what this character, Jade, I think, has done, then, in my opinion, good on you.
Yeah, sure. You know, like, it's not to shit on her. It's just, like, it's not to shit on her at all. It's, like, it's not her. Like, it's just, like, it's the fact that, like, they've basically written a character. Like, if this was like written by a woman and the whole episode treated this woman incredibly differently, like I have no issue with who she is as a person. My issue is not at all about her. It's just like the way that they've written her to be this like one-dimensional person who just like only wants sex and like only wants sex with Bob and like
not only to only want sex, but also to basically to only be used for sex and to only have like to not be humanized, to just be manipulated to have sex with, like it's sort of like, because there's nothing else about her, it makes it like for us, we as like the people watching Chandler do this, a character that we have come to love, we can hate him less for what he is doing, or think it's more okay what he's doing because of how they've like created this character for us to like consume her,
Yeah. And like Ross kind of acts as the voice of reason, which is like, again, it's so weird when he does, but like it is one of those.
I don't know. I think Ross has some
you're right. I take that back.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like he's kind of like, you can't do this. Like you're pure evil. He literally says to Chandler, and Chandler was like, pure evil or horny and alone. And he's like, I've been this, referring to being like horny and alone. And you're like, Chandler, can you not pick pure evil? Like,
this kind of goes into like the realm of like, is incels? Is that the right term that I'm using?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always get mixed up with something else. Yeah, it's like, it kind of goes into like the realm of like incels, where it's sort of like people thinking that they deserve to have sex and also like not have to pay for it. It's like, I deserve to have sex for free with people because either I'm like horny and alone and I think myself to be a decent enough human, like, and it's like, it's true. Like, everyone deserves sex. Everyone, everyone deserves, good things to them and to have like, to feel fulfilled. But that doesn't mean that you deserve it at the cost of essentially like, sexually assaulting someone else. Definitely not. And
manipulating, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it becomes an assault. It was not consensual. Like, that was not real consent. Consent is informed consent, meaning that like the person had a full grasp of what was happening.
Yeah.
Basically, like, he like threw a veil over the situation, and so she didn't know what was going on, and then basically took like set it up so that he could have sex with her. Like, it was like really fucked up,
Yeah. Like super fucked up.
Like, lying to someone to have sex with them is not consensual and is therefore assault. Manipulation can be assault. And so it's just like, informed consent, informed, enthusiastic consent. That's what we're going for.
Right.
Going for. Lol. That is the bar. That should be the bar and is not depicted. Going for makes it seem like, roughly around there.
You also, you moved through the whole episode very quickly. We haven't gotten there yet.
I know,
Quinn.
I guess. Yes, but okay, still on this topic though. I guess I wanted to point out that, like, I feel this episode, it's like something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I feel like maybe people have noticed how I've been like, these are not real people. And I say that on this podcast because I feel like we do like kind of use these characters as a tool to like deconstruct like different conversations they have and relationship dynamics and whatnot. But I feel like at the same time I struggle with finding that line between like seeing, like, taking on that role of kind of just using this as like, these are people, let's use it in that sense. But then also on the other side though, having to analyze and critique the way that these characters have been constructed. In actuality, there was a person behind this that have created these characters. And, and in this case, Chris Brown created this character. And, and I guess like, anyway, this was like an episode that really kind of like brought this home even further for me, because it's sort of like on the one hand, if Jade was like a real person, I'd be like, go for it, dude. Like, you do you. But like, because that's not a real person, someone created it, we have to look at like how this person, like this character was created, to what end was this person created and depicted, and what, you know, like how do we consume that? How do we then internalize that? Anyway, I needed to say that in this episode.
Okay, so the next scene we're in Monica and Rachel's apartment. Ross is on the phone. They're basically just setting us up to tell us that Julie's not around. That's kind of all, like she's not in town. So that's the setup. But then so that's why she's not at Ross's birthday. I guess that's what they're trying to set up for us. Okay. But then so then Chandler says to Rachel, Monica, and Rachel, Phoebe, and Joey that everyone owes him $62 for his birthday. So $62 in 1995 is actually $107 today. So that's actually
are you serious?
Yeah.
That's not really? That's inflation?
Yeah,
really?
I looked it up. $62 US in 1995 is $107 today. Well, at least on the one website I looked it up. If I'm wrong, correct me. Again, send us an email.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. And then there is this like moment where everyone is like, are you sure you're not rounding up from like $20? And it is one of those situations where right away it's shown that like I guess I'm kind of confused. Like, did they already discuss that this is what they were going to do for the birthday and then didn't realize how expensive it was going to be and then it happened? Or like, what were the conversations that were had? You know what I mean? Like, or was
That's a good point.
Because it was like, oh yeah, like let's buy Ross concert tickets. Maybe like all they agreed to was the concert and they didn't think that there would also be a present and a cake involved. And so they were like, oh, expecting the like at least relatively expensive cost of the concert, but not necessarily the cost of like the cake and everything else that goes with it as well.
Yeah. And I think this is like a fairly common thing that can happen in these situations, right? It's like one person brings up, hey, maybe we should go do this for this person's birthday. And people are like, yeah, I would like to do that. And that person, that money is not as much of a big deal, kind of like then takes on running with it, even if like the other people hadn't actually fully thought it through. And then just like assumes that these other things are needed to be tacked on and assumes that everyone would be on board because financially it's okay for them. And so like, and doesn't have like that, like didn't think through the process of like, oh, other people might not want that, you know, like might not be able to afford that. Yeah. And so, you know, like I definitely have been in these kind of situations where it's like, oh, frig, like I didn't realize this, you know, and it can be really hard if you're not in a situation where the people that you are doing this with are open to talking about money or just like that you have a lot of internalized shame and don't want to share that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so then eventually Chandler runs off with Ross. They're gonna go meet Jade in the coffee shop. Gross. We'll get to that in a second. But so then it's just Phoebe, Joey, and Rachel in the room. And Rachel like kind of tentatively brings it up with the other two in the way that like you're not really like she can tell that like you can tell that she's not really sure how they're going to react. And she's like, do you guys ever get the feeling that they don't really get how much money we make? So like the way that she's bringing this up, you could tell like it's the first time that they're talking about it between the three of them. Like that's just like the start of their conversations around it. And then they kind of get really funny in which they're like making fun of Ross and they're like, for Ross. They're like not really making fun of Ross, but just like this like super petty. I love it. It's like they're just like kind of annoyed in the situation. They don't really know how to handle it. So they're just like picking whatever they can pick on, you know? And then obviously Monica walks in and she got a promotion at work. Woo, woo, woo. But she ran into Joey and Chandler and Ross in the hall and they're going to go someplace nice.
I think this is like such a perfect setup where they're like, it's always something, you know, like, yeah, always has to go somewhere. It has to be someplace nice. And then Monica comes in and says, let's go someplace nice. Yeah. It's just so perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I find this episode actually like very funny. And like there's parts of it that like really annoy me that they're so funny because I'm laughing at something that I really think is horrible. But in this case, it's just funny.
The script is good in this episode. Like like the dialogue, I should say. The dialogue is good in this episode.
Yeah. So essentially, then we move down and we're in the cafe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, wait, actually, sorry. I want to point something out before we go into the next scene about the last scene. So 2 things. One is that Rachel asked them, she's like, what are you guys doing for dinner tonight? And then Joey is like, well, like, since we have to pay so much money for the birthday, like, I guess just staying at home and eating dust bunnies. And it's just so funny because, like, he's literally in the middle of eating food as she asks him what they're doing for dinner. And I just think it's, like, the classic portrayal of, like, Joey always eating, which I think is great. And then another thing I want to point out is Phoebe's shirt. It kind of looks like a bunch of articles are, like, put together, like newspaper articles, or like is the fabric. It's a very weird shirt, but I'm kind of into it. I don't know how I feel about it, but yeah. Anyways, wanted to point that out. I wanted to point it out because in the next scene, Jade is wearing a great dress.
Is it made of articles?
I don't know, but it kind of looks like similar. Like it looks like it's made out of a bunch of photographs. Like it's kind of weird too. Like I say great, but like it's great in the 90s, and I would never ever put it on me ever. But like obviously she looks great. Like she looks like a babe. Jade is super hot, super into Jade. Except the fact that she's crying because this person who she thought was supposed to meet her stood her up.
So like, okay, yeah. Like, thing 1, you know, like, basically just, like, emotionally hurt this person, you know, like, that's what like, yeah. Chandler, what the frig are you doing? Like, she's literally nothing to him except for sex. Mm-hmm. But, like, first of all, so they're sitting in the cafe, and, like, Chandler's there, like, sussing her out. Yeah. You know, like, they're there, and, like, Ross is being a voice of reason, but I also like there's a part. Sorry,
I said question mark.
Like, yeah, he's like being a voice of reason. Part of me is like, you know, some of his reasoning is Bob might be the person she's meant to be with, and I'm kind of like, first of all, like that's not really a thing.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the questionable part, because like he's not really like, you shouldn't do this because this is like really harmful to this woman's psyche and like sexual assaulty. He's like, you shouldn't do this because like Bob. Like, you know?
Yeah, like, no, exactly. Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to, I mean, he did call Chandler pure evil earlier, but like I would say that like, you know, like if your friend is about to do something like this, you know, it's not about Bob. It's not about, like, you know, some sort of fairy tale ending. It's not, you know, like this is, your friend is about to, like, take part in, like, sexually assaulting someone, you know, like, and, like, that's serious. Like, like, Ross should be doing more, essentially, you know?
Yeah, like, okay, I want to give some room here, okay? Like, I want to give room to the fact that, like, And this is not giving excuses, it's just giving room in the sense that, like, the ways in which we have conversations around consent are very, very different now than they were 25 years ago when this episode came out. So, I do not think that an episode like this would have been written today. And I think that, like, the way in which Ross takes these steps, I think that is the most that you could ask for someone from 1995. Like... And again, I'm not like excusing it. I'm just saying, like, we just did not have these conversations in the ways that we're having them now.
Yes and no. Like, he also very directly takes part in hiding what Chandler is doing from everyone else. You know, like, Chandler is keeping this from everyone else, and Ross, like, respects that. You know, like, you know, how many times in this series do, like, these 6 friends, like, just, like, shame each other publicly and humiliate each other for, like, little things that they do, or things that they don't agree with that they're doing. And, like, here Ross is just sort of being like,
sneaky about it.
Oh, you're doing this quote unquote like kind of like sneaky thing. Like, okay, you know.
But I do think like I don't think that anyone's denying that what Chandler is doing is wrong. Like Chandler knows that what he's doing is wrong. But I think that the conversations around it is more along the lines of like, this is mean as opposed to this is sexual assaulty. Do you know what I mean? Like,
No,
I
I know.
think those conversations are the big difference, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Like they have evolved. But yes, no, I agree with you. They have evolved, but we do like also need to acknowledge that like Ross should be doing more. Also, he should know more. You know, like just because it was 1995 doesn't mean, you know, like yeah.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
So then, yeah. So Chandler even straight up says the line, I could never get a girl like this with conventional methods. So in the sense that like he is very clearly aware of the fact that he's manipulating this situation in non-conventional methods in order.
Also like just like the wording, like like getting and methods, like what the frig are you talking about? Which is like, and what you're talking about is like things like, you know, pickup artists.
Yeah, which is where, I wanted to bring that conversation in a little bit. Like,
you know, like the book, The Game, that was really popular, like 10 years ago, you know, like, that like a book that's entirely written as like a manual for men, essentially, to like prey on women. And
and
like,
specifically
using manipulation tactics to like, in order to like get women to sleep with you, and
specifically negging in the sense that like offering, like basically giving, this isn't quite negging in the sense of like in the traditional way we see. So negging being the idea of like giving someone kind of like a negative compliment in the sense like you're kind of like insulting her, but like you're the one that's like tolerating it. Like you're the one that's gonna date her even though like she has these negative qualities, sort of thing. But like specifically in the realm of like him, he is setting her up to be hurt. Like he is setting up the situation so she is vulnerable, so she is sad. So she's sitting there thinking, wow, this guy who like I really like, who I thought I was meeting, straight up is just not showing up. So like he's basically like insulting her without her knowing that he's the one insulting her. And it also makes me think of like what would happen if like he went down to the coffee shop and he didn't find her attractive. Like would he have just like walked away? Like it's just like what is your plan, Chandler? Like it's just really, really fucked up. But anyways, okay, let's go to the next scene.
And so they're the next scene, they're at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And they're cheersing, and Monica keeps adding things to the cheersing.
Which is great.
And
one thing I pointed out is that you'll notice that Chandler Ross has a beer, Monica has wine, and the three other ones have water that they're cheersing with.
I did notice that. Yeah. That was...
So they have this server show up, and I have weird feelings about this server. Like I don't know what they're trying to say. Like he's supposed to be like hoity-toity, but it's just like, I guess it's just like, are servers ever really hoity-toity? Like this portrayal.
Well, I love what Kayla said in our watch party, where Kayla is one of our patrons, and she was like, you know, when I was a waiter, I wish I could have been that rude to clients and gotten away with it. You know? And it's so true, because I've also been like waited on tables, and I've worked extensively in the customer service realm, and it's just like, you can't, like, this is like an unrealistic character, and I don't know if like that's where the humor is in it. You know, like especially at a fancy restaurant like this.
Yeah, like it's not to say that like there aren't rude servers. Like there's definitely rude servers, just like there's rude people. Like rudeness exists regardless of your profession. But like in the sense of like there is this like weird thing where like
servers are people too. But like actually though, treat them nicely.
but like it's just kind of weird how the whole conversation of the episode is about like basically classism and like financial disparity, and yet they're portraying this person who is serving on them like as being the one who thinks he's above them. Like it's just like it's kind of like the writer didn't read the room. Yeah, so whatever. Like let's leave him behind because I feel like we've just got way too much to talk about.
Yeah. We're like trying to power through this. We're like, okay, we're gonna do this in 45 minutes. We're at 48, guys.
Yeah, it was just too much to talk about this episode, honestly. But like, we are talking a lot about every aspect of this episode. But yeah, no, okay. So then the server. Okay, so Chandler walks in. He's like kind of whispering to Ross behind the menu, as if menus can block out sound. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I do think that it's maybe like more effective because they're actually whispering, kind of, you know, like or like speaking. It's very much insinuated that they're speaking a lot more softly behind menus, and I think that is much more realistic than, let's say, you know, when they're speaking in the kitchen and basically yelling at each other in the kitchen, and the people in the living room are not supposed to be able to hear, you know, because it's the same room.
Sure. Fair. But like still sitting on the table, it's like, I guess like if it's a loud restaurant, but like it doesn't feel like it's a loud restaurant because it's a fancy restaurant. I don't know. Like it just feels like
also it's more comical and I like it. So
all right, sure. I'm also just being a shit. Like it's just like one of those classic ways that like Friends do that. Sitcoms do that a lot where like they try to have two conversations in the same scene, and it's like anyways. Like, so they finally basically bring up, so obviously Rachel, Phoebe, and Joey order like nothing kind of foods, and then also Chandler being sarcastic with like the waiter just rubs me the wrong way again in these like conversations around financial disparity. We get the ending of this sort of scene in which they're kind of like splitting up the bill, which like we asked, I think, did you ask in our polls if you do this with your friends? Because like I have never gone out for dinner with a friend and had us like split the bill by the number of people that are there. Like you always just pay for what you bought. Like what is this? Is this a rich people thing? I don't know.
Well, I mean like yeah, I think that okay, so I have been in those sort of situations. I think it's really shitty when you don't realize in advance, and it is usually people who like money is less of an issue, kind of thing. I think that like in general that like if you are to do that, like people should talk about it beforehand. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I've definitely been in situations where it's like people are there and they're like ordering like appetizers and then kind of being like, oh, you know, like we'll just order these and then we'll just split the whole bill. And it's just like, and you're just kind of like,
no.
Okay. I would never order an appetizer at this restaurant.
That's so funny. Yeah. For sure.
But you know, like you kind of don't really want to say anything. But
right. Yeah. And then, okay, so like I will give them credit for the fact that like it was 1995 and like now, I think I put this in the watch party, but like POS systems now, what are they called? Point of service systems, I guess, like allow you to naturally split up the bill. So like I think it's a lot easier for like a server to split up the bill. So I can understand. And very
often like restaurants will have a policy that like over, you know, insert amount of people here, like over 5 people, they're not going to do individual bills per person. It'll be on one tab.
Right.
And,
yeah.
Like, and that is out of respect of, like, I actually, like, when I see that at restaurants, I usually feel like that is them trying to help out their servers. Because when you start having parties of, like, 13 people, it's very often that, like, you know, someone will be too drunk and duck out, and then you didn't get someone for, you know, that thing, or someone argues that like one thing wasn't theirs, and you know, like, and it's just like it gets complicated, and you know, having a restaurant having that kind of policy is really just to like help support the servers because large groups of people are just annoying.
I'm sorry. I got mildly distracted and I'm going to keep this in the podcast because right now, looking out my window, there is a very, very cute dog and he has fashioned himself so he is behind the curtains and looking out the window. So the curtains are behind only his head, but the rest of his body is behind the curtains. And he has his eyes closed and his face pressed against the glass. And I took a picture and he is a very cute doggo and I will post it on our Facebook stories or our Instagram stories.
Okay. Can you post it as like a post that will be there forever?
Okay. Yes, sure. He is very cute. Okay. Distracted mildly.
It was a good distraction. It was worth it. So what I did ask on our polls is, are you able to have conversations around finances and what activities you can afford with your friends or close family? And 89% said yes. So I'm actually like really happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I remember a little while back, probably, like, I think it was 2 Christmases ago, like, we actually got into kind of a conversation around this about gift buying, in which we actually kind of go through this every year, to be honest. But, like, specifically, we had said we were going to get, like, play tickets for our parents, and then it was, like, a big stress because we were like, okay, well, then, like, are we buying for partners as well to come?
Right.
And then like, so are we like now splitting the cost for the partners or do partners have to pay for their tickets? And like, it was just like this really intense thing that got kind of messy and we kind of like all agreed on something, but not everyone felt comfortable with it. And it was just like this big mess in which we ended up spending so much money and it was like super stressful and I was like so overwhelmed because it was at a time when like I was like having one income and supporting a partner and like or my partner and it was like just like really intense and yeah, so I think like we've been down that road. I find it interesting throughout this episode that like Rachel, like there's no conversation at all about the fact that like Rachel grew up in a place of privilege, you know? Like Rachel had the opportunity to have a shit ton of money. And then like she was basically like I think we talked about this in the first episode of the show in which like she's basically manipulated by her father into coming back into the family by saying that like he'll buy shit for her. And then she is like, I don't want to come back to the family, basically. And like, and
I don't want to be a hat, daddy.
yeah. But like, and so she ends up being like basically cut off completely financially, after never having worked a job before in her life. And I do think it's interesting that like, so she lived her entire life with financial privilege, you know? And I do think like that there is something to be said, and I think we've had conversations around this before around like the difference between being broke and being poor. Like specifically when it comes to white wealth, like white wealth is one of those things that's like generational and is accrued because of like literally, you know, owning people, specifically owning slaves. And it's like that wealth was accrued over centuries and has been continuously passed down to other white people in the ways that it's not passed down to people of color. And so like, I think that there is something to be said about Rachel's wealth, and stuff like that. And so like her, at any point in time, if ever she was in a rough predicament, she could probably turn to her family, no problem. I do think that is like important to be said. And I think that probably could be said about Joey too, but it couldn't be said about Phoebe. Phoebe does not have family. You know what I mean? Phoebe is like, does not have the opportunity ever to turn to family for money. Like she just doesn't.
No, I think that like you're making a really good point. I mean, I hear what you're saying with Rachel, but I actually think that maybe at this point in the show, like because she's in like an all or nothing situation, it's like, yes, her general safety is probably intact. Like she would never be homeless. Like she could go to her family, but I don't think she's in a situation where it's like, oh, I can't make ends meet. Maybe I can borrow some money from my parents, you know, to help buffer this situation, because I think in some ways, like, she's been a little bit like shunned, she was given a bit of an ultimatum, right?
And you know what?
Yeah.
Later on in this season, well, we find out at the end of this episode, so it's not a spoiler, that Monica is fired. But later on in this season, they do explore being broke again in a very specific way when it comes to Monica and the ways in which she handles that. So maybe we could go down that road when we get there a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe we can put a little pin when it comes to that.
Like, money is like a difficult issue, and then we also have to recognize that, like, our experience of money, like us, like not just us two, but like just in general as a people out there, that like your experience of money is not necessarily representative of what other people's experience of money, even if it's like you are just as broke as someone right now, like like the way that Phoebe, when Phoebe is broke versus Joey being broke, where it's like, we know that Joey has a big family who loves to feed him, there's a certain amount of like safety involved in that. Whereas like for Phoebe, there's a lot less of that. And being broke has a much larger connotation to it.
Yeah, totally. When they find out that Ross has split the bill 6 ways and then 5 because Monica shouldn't pay, it's her special night, then I forget who says it. I think it's Phoebe. She goes, "Nuh-uh, no way, not gonna happen." And then we get like this kind of rapey line from Chandler where he's like, "Oh, prom night flashback." And it's just like, what happened that night, Chandler? I hope that you listened when she said, "Nuh-uh, no way, not gonna happen." So let's hope he did listen, and he walked away and everything went well. I
don't know, with other perspective of this episode, or with this episode in context, who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, so then Rachel says like she doesn't really want to talk about it because it's like gonna make people uncomfortable. And then we get like a line that I honestly think just sums up privilege in a really, really great way.
Yeah.
And it's when
it's the perfect line.
It's the perfect line. Ross says, "I guess I never think of money as an issue." And then Rachel replies, "That's because you have it." And that's just like the definition. Like, I never really think of race as an issue. That's because you're white. Like, I never really think of like homophobia as an issue because you're straight. Like that is just the definition of privilege. Like, if you don't have to think about these things on a daily basis, it's probably because like you don't hold a marginalized identity in that area. It's interesting that, and I think that piece of writing is really good. But I actually appreciate that like Ross listens to that and he's like, "Good point, you're right." So like that's good. Chandler is really not cool in this scene. And so he basically is like, "Oh, well, like maybe we won't do the whole Ross hoopla thing." And he was like, "Well, we were going to do a concert and then other things." Yeah,
Chandler really shouldn't have shared that information with Ross. You could have had a very successful conversation around this without actually having shared that aspect. And I feel like the rest of the episode would have gone a lot differently because, like, it's like bringing that in just sort of makes it seem like you didn't actually want it to not happen,
Yeah, like totally. It's like Chandler wanted to do this thing and was kind of annoyed, and so therefore like was like brought it up so that it's just like it's a very weird thing for Chandler to do, and I just think that
I know we don't normally like nominate worst friend of the episode, but like Chandler definitely gets worst friend of the episode.
100%. I want to nominate Chandler as the worst friend of the episode. Oh my god, yeah, he's the worst. Okay, but then oh my god, I don't know how we're gonna nominate best friend of this episode. So then they like next scene basically. Monica
in the apartment.
Yeah, and Monica has brought home 5 steaks and an eggplant for Phoebe, which is very cute. And it's kind of like
and they have a cute little skit.
Yeah, so good. Chandler says it was better in the hall. I refuse to believe that.
I think it was pretty great then and there.
Yeah.
I think Chandler was just a little embarrassed.
Yeah, fair. And then, and so obviously Monica got these from like the meat supplier, I guess. I think that's important for later. They switched meat suppliers at work and she got like these free steaks, quote unquote free steaks.
Yeah, and then essentially these three have decided they basically like end up buying the tickets and basically arranging so that they can have like a fancy meal and without their friends having to pay for it. But then they also go ahead and buy the tickets and basically are like, we're just gonna give these to you. Yeah. Which like is totally understandable, like why they thought this was a good idea.
Yeah, I'm all for redistribution of wealth. I'm into it.
Okay, yeah. And so like this is actually something where like I kind of like wanted to have a conversation about like the idea of like charity in like money relationship dynamics versus like redistribution of wealth, and like closing the wealth gap with your friends. And it's like, because the thing is that like, yes, we need to like respect people and it can end up feeling, depending on like the types of relationships you have with each other and the types of like conversations around money that exist, like someone just being like, oh, well, I'm just going to pay for this for you can feel like charity or demeaning. And that's okay if you feel that way. But also, I think we need to recognize in our world that like just because you don't have money doesn't mean that you're not working as hard, and it doesn't mean that you do not deserve things, and I think that we need to create more space in relationships where part of our like friend dynamics and community dynamics are more malleable for us to be able to have these openings where it's like, oh, well, if I'm inviting you to do this thing that I know is like out of your budget, like I'm willing to pay that money. Or if we're going to all go in on a gift and I have this idea for a gift, I know that I probably have more money, or I'm more willing to put in more money, then I can be like, well, I'll pay this and then you guys pay. Like I'll buy it and then whatever you guys want or can afford to put in, you guys throw in and I will make up that gap. Like certain things like that where it's like, it allows for the, the reality that like not everyone is making the same amount of money and things should be scaled as such,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So like it's a fine line because of the fact that like, I do think that there is this like idea of like capitalist pride, like in the sense of like, if you haven't made it yet, it's because you're not working hard enough. And therefore accepting any quote unquote handouts makes you like a lower person. Which is like where we get into a lot of like middle class people shaming people who use food stamps or like people who get money from the government. And like it becomes this, instead of like middle class people being upset with the rich, which is like actually what we need to be doing, and taxing the rich, like instead we just have middle class who are like upset with poor people for like quote unquote draining the system. So I think that like there is this like pride thing that people need to get over when it comes to accepting financial help, but it's also sorry,
and
but
also just this recognition that this concept of like you need to do it on your own is not real. Like people who are rich, like the billionaires and the millionaires that exist today, they didn't like, it's literally just the few like stories of like the capitalist dream of like that person who rose from like rags to riches in like in their one lifetime. Like those are like the very far and few between that exist. Yeah. The actual majority of people who have lots of wealth did not do it on their own, and they did it by accumulating wealth throughout generations, and also by continuously having help and support, both financially and both like education wise from like highly educated people who they were around, and all these other aspects of having all these very advantageous resources at their disposal. Like that is how they got somewhere. This concept of being like, you need to do it on your own or else you're not valuable, that is false. That doesn't exist. Like that is like, no one has ever like quote unquote made it, because that's something to deconstruct on its own, by doing it on their own. That's just not a thing.
Like it is one of those things where it's like, sometimes people are not making very much money, but they can borrow money from a family member or a friend and then get out of the red and then get a college degree and then get a good job or whatever. And like, you know, it is like, even when you think that someone has like pulled themselves up from their bootstraps or whatever that shitty expression is, like it's like there were 86 people pulling them up by their bootstraps, you know? Like it was multiple people like making that happen, and also like multiple privileged identities that can pull through as well, you know? Like there's just like so many aspects that prevent people from accruing wealth, and like it's just it's not a matter of did you work hard enough for this or did you not, you know? Okay, yeah. So then moving on, basically they're like, this is not cool. We don't really like that you have like bought these tickets for us, and it feels really uncomfortable. Like we don't feel good about this. And then they all have an argument. Rachel wears a great outfit, this black t-shirt and like these beige-ish high-waisted shorts. I'm super into it. And then Ross is like, we can't win with you guys, blah, 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 blah. And then they like decide that they're going to go to the concert without them. So they end up at the concert. Everyone's like feeling kind of uncomfortable. They don't really know how to deal with things. Also, I want to say that, wait, before they end up at the concert, they're at Chandler's apartment. And Chandler, they get a phone call from Jade.
He's like, I just want to tell you that I had sex today. It's like, oh my God, you had sex today. Oh my God, it's so much cooler when you say it.
Yeah, that's a great line.
This storyline bothers me even more because I think that the dialogue and the jokes in it are so funny. Like, I think that Chandler does a really good job at his delivery of lines and his intonations, that it's like every time I laugh. I think it's freaking hilarious. And that's like, it's something that like really bothers me, because then when I look at it in actuality, like what we're actually laughing at, it's anyway, that's why we have this podcast. Continue.
Yeah, okay, so Chandler, I want to say first that Chandler is wearing a vest, which is a terrible, terrible vest. I give it an F. That vest fails. But then he puts on a jacket that is on top of his vest, and it's an A+ jacket. So I'm just like, Chandler, figure it out. Your jacket is great. Your vest is terrible. Figure out your shit. Okay, yeah. So then,
I mean, he'll never leave those vests, though. He's stuck on those vests.
Such a vest guy. Yeah. So then she calls the answering machine to tell Bob that she had sex today, and it was terrible sex.
Else.
Yeah, and okay, first of all, again, like, sure, like, it's just like, I want to be like, props to you, girl, for like sex positivity, doing this. It's just like, I can't even props her, because I just feel like this whole situation is such a caricature. You know what I mean? Like they've like made her out to be this like super horny, like clearly male gazy character who like only exists for Chandler. At least, like, this is, you know, Chandler getting what he deserves, which is he just gets insulted and told that he just, like, has terrible sex, which, like, was anyone surprised? And she says that he was nothing compared to Bob, and that she had to bite her lip to prevent herself from calling out Bob's name. And
so weird. And I also, like, want to point out that, like, if you are just using someone for sex for yourself, then I'm not surprised. Like, if this person was literally like basically both like a blow up doll and like a game that you won, then like, you probably were bad at sex. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, You're
yes.
having, yeah. Anyway.
So he was bumpy, which is a really hilarious thing that's said. Yeah. Also, like, does anyone else want to have sex with Bob? Because it sounds like he knows what he's doing. No, I'm kidding. Like the fact that she calls him 3 times because she had such a good night with him. Like, I'm like, yo, Bob, like,
yeah. How you doing?
Exactly. Like, it's Anyways,
we're at the concert.
So also, this is the exact same set that they were in when they went to go see Joey in the play. Just saying. Same, like, red curtains behind them. So they're having the concert starts. The other ones are guessing what Joey's fingers are behind his back. Everyone's feeling shitty, having a shitty ass night, except when the concert starts. Then Chandler, Ross, and Monica have a great ass time at their fancy concert. And they meet little Stevie Fisher at the end, who Monica used to babysit.
Yes. So, okay, wait. First of all, I want to point out that I asked the question, have you ever left a concert after it started? Because I feel like it's just a very unlikely thing, you know, when they're like sitting there and they're like, we should leave. I'm like, lol. Anyway, 32% of people said they have, not 68% said that they left. No, sorry, that they didn't. They've never left a concert after it started.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe like I don't know if it's like the same thing. If it's like you paid that much money for the tickets, I don't know. Whatever. Who knows? It kind of depends on the kind of concert. But anyways, okay, irrelevant.
Not the point. So here we have little Davy Fisher, who turns out Monica used to babysit him, and after inviting them back to like meet the band, they're like walking on the way there, and he's like, "Hey, were you one of the babysitters that fooled around with my dad?" Which like is like it's very intense, but you know, kind of being like thrown out there randomly, which I don't even know how to start deconstructing it there. But can we flip to the next scene?
Yeah, sure.
Where then you know, at the beginning of this scene, you know, Monica says that, you know, tells Rachel that she ran into Davy Fisher, and Rachel is like, hey, how is his dad doing? And there's like almost this implication that like Rachel, I don't know, it's like it's very suggestive, this joke. Am I wrong?
It's supposed
with
to
that?
imply that Rachel fooled around with her dad. Rachel fooled around with Stevie's dad. And it's like, it's this weird thing in which like Monica is kind of like weirded out by Rachel, but Monica should be like weirded out by Stevie's dad. What
in the context of like this the context of like this entire episode, I feel like, especially like looking back at my younger self, like and how I was like, you know, internalizing this, I definitely kind of thought like there was like this internal like, oh, Rachel, like weirded out by Rachel, you know, like that's sort of what this creates, when in actuality, you know, if you're a teenager and, you know, this dad is fooling around with like multiple babysitters, like Monica should be having a conversation with Rachel in that like, hey, like, are you okay? You know, like what happened there? Like, do you want to talk about this? You know, like that's.
Yeah, because it's also, okay, so it should be said that in the last episode, like in the last season, the one with the ick factor, we find out that Monica is 26. So let's just say that she's had a birthday since then, and let's just give her the fact that she's 27, which means that Rachel and Monica are the same age. So let's say Rachel is 27, okay? That's being generous because she might be 26. But yeah, let's say Rachel is 27, okay? And this little Stevie Fisher was
8 years old then.
Yeah, but before that, he's a lawyer, right? That's one thing we didn't mention. He's the lawyer for Hootie and the Blowfish. So if he's a lawyer, that means he has to be at least what, 22, 23? Like minimum?
Right. Yeah, it's like he can't be that different of an age, like let's say like he was 8 and then maybe they were like 13, because that's like the youngest. Like I'm just trying to like create the age difference, because they're like it's the first season, like the second season, they're not that old.
Yeah, that's what I just said. They're 27, right? So like
yeah, like at most. And so like maybe there's like a 5-year age difference between them. Like I think the earliest that you could be like a lawyer out of law school, like you couldn't be younger than 22.
Yeah, like it makes no sense. So they're like maximum 5 years different. So he was 8,
yeah,
which means he was 13. Like that's like fucking gross.
That's
like
fucked up.
Either the writers just didn't calculate this joke. I don't think. Like they didn't.
Yeah, clearly.
Like I think they were like trying to imply that like maybe they were like 17. You know, like. But it's like even if they were 17. Like it could also be a situation where like she's like, you can't be like, you know, a lawyer, you're 8, because like, you know, you've babysat people and you always think they're younger than they actually are, like that big joke of like, oh, you're like only 8 years old, you know? So like maybe they were like, maybe Rachel was like 17 and he was 12, you know, like, but you don't really get babysat when you're 12. Maybe you do. I don't know. Like it's just like a whole awkward situation. And it's just like a kind of weirdly written joke that like implies that like a child fooled around with his dad. And like, even if she was at the age of consent, it doesn't remove the fact that there's like a very real power dynamic when you are hiring a babysitter and paying them money. So it's like,
I just have like this, right? Okay, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because I just having like this moment of like, and I hope this is more like, this is what I want to see this as now. Like, so he's a lawyer now, right? And I kind of like just want to hope that maybe he's inquiring like, hey, are you one of the ones that fooled around my dad? Because he's trying to put together a class action suit against his dad.
Oh my God, okay.
Of his babysitters.
I don't want to talk about this anymore. I just want that to be what we finish with. That is what actually is happening in this situation. Stevie Fisher wants to sue his dad and wants to rally all the women who were sexually assaulted by his dad when they were children, and that is why he is asking.
Oh, beautiful. I love this seriously, I feel like we just need to start writing some fan fiction for this show.
Yeah, that's true. Into that. Okay,
parallel
great.
universe of Friends. Okay.
Ah, man. Love it. Okay.
Now they're still having an argument again about, you know, the fact that they went to the concert, and I don't really particularly care to get into a conversation as to like who was right. Is it valid for them to be upset? Like, yeah, I don't know.
It is kind of weird. Like, we don't really have to get into it, but like, I do find it awkward that like they ultimately, they said it out of anger, but they were like, just go to the concert. Like, we don't have to do everything together. Like, you can't then turn around and be like, well, like, why did you go to the concert? We just stayed at home and like watched Joey's fingers. Like, first of all, they have TV. They could have done something different than that.
That was ridiculous.
Like that's not a valid complaint. Like, you can't get mad at your friends for like, but it's like, I get that it's like not cool that they decided to do this thing where they go to the concert and like,
it's more nuanced. Yeah. It's like more like it's not one in like you can't see it in isolation. It's like it's a bigger thing, right? That's happening. And so like I understand the emotion, like the feelings about it, but like again, kind of like to circle back around to what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode is that like nothing actually gets concluded, because what happens next is that they're talking about it again, they're arguing, and then they get interrupted because Monica gets a phone call, and it turns out that she's being fired from some strange corporate policy,
which makes no
where
sense.
that she couldn't get like a tip off by a supplier, which like, like lol, the restaurant industry, like I guess she was working at a really great place, but it's just like lol, restaurant industry is like, it's so rare that you have a corporate policy, and that's why like it's one of like the toughest and like most excruciating workplaces to like have a career in, because it's like not regulated and there's so much under the table. But anyway,
but she couldn't like that. Okay, you can't say like she worked at a decent place, because a decent place would have given her a warning. I've
true.
Like I've worked at restaurants before in which I've been given a warning for doing something that was like not cool, and like they don't just like unless it's massive, they don't just fire you on the spot. And like clearly she did not mean to make this error. Like it feels like a just any random excuse to like have this storyline. Like it just kind of like, obviously it was just like someone in the writer's room was like, okay, let this makes sense. The end.
Yeah. And you know, like, and if you get fired randomly like this without a warning, like this is something that like you should be looking into, and and like clearly there is like another reason that you're not being told. Like the amount of energy and time that an employer has to go through to like hire and train someone, and she's been there for so long. Like there's something off here. But anyway,
yeah, unless like she could have signed a contract and just didn't read the contract, and like that's kind of on her. Yeah. But like still, like there's just people should not be shitheads. It's just kind of what the conclusion should be. But yeah, anyway, so
then it's just interesting because like they're in this middle of this conversation, they get interrupted. Monica is now fired, and it sort of feels like the solution to this whole situation was that before it was divided, 50-50, like you had like, 3 friends who did not have a lot of money and, or like money to spend on outings and whatnot. And then, the other 3 friends that had, a very solid income. And then now it's just 2 against 4, which means that like the solution was that now there's a lot more weight behind doing less extravagant things, and that was the solution. You just have more people in the same situation, which is like really, like, I mean, they don't. It's very strange.
They do get into like Monica being broke later on in the season, and like they explore that arc a little bit, which like I'm for, but they don't ever come back to the conversation around like the financial disparity between friends. Like it's a weird thing that they never come back to. Yeah, and like it is weird that they're just like, yeah, so problem solved. Monica just needed to get fired for them to like resolve it. I do think like what they're trying to show is like it doesn't matter how angry they are when like a friend is experiencing something shitty, they all rally together, which like I did appreciate that. It was kind of like this moment of like, okay, let's put our like anger and frustrations and arguments aside to like comfort and support our friend in this moment. Like I was all for that. I'm down for that. But I do think like they do need to resolve it. Hopefully they resolve it not on screen, and we just weren't privy to that conversation.
Yes. And I do feel like that in some ways a lot of these things are implied. That's the case, but...
Right.
Anyway, who do you think is the best friend of the episode, Em?
Okay, wait. First we have to talk about the final scene, which is when Jade is calling again. Again. Right. A third time. In this very unrealistic portrayal of a situation. Jade calls a third time, and then Joey goes to jump off the couch, and apparently, I was reading, fun fact of the episode, Joey is actually supposed to pick up the phone and say, Bob here, in the same way that Chandler did at the beginning of the episode, but he accidentally fell off the couch, and so they decided to just keep that in. So,
oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so I was for that. I was like, nice, into it. So yeah, Joey falling off the couch was not scripted.
And it's so much better. Like,
so much better.
Karma,
Yeah. Into it.
Okay. Who do you think is best friend of the episode?
All right. So I think it's hard to say. Like, I'm leaning towards Phoebe or Rachel.
Yeah, I agree. I think,
and it's not because they did anything particularly good. It's just that they didn't do anything particularly bad.
I mean, I think I'm leaning towards Rachel and Phoebe because, like, these conversations are hard conversations to have. And, like, being the ones to, like, throw your hat in the ring and, like, initiate these conversations. Like, if, like, I would say, like, Phoebe, probably, because she was the one that, like, really took it on, and...
Rachel didn't really want to talk about it, which I think that's just something that just builds passive aggression and resentment in like friendships. So yeah, Phoebe like definitely did take it on. Oh my God. Actually, I want to change the way we do this segment. And I want to just like start nominating anyone outside of the 6 group of friends. And I want to nominate Stevie Fisher in the alternate universe in which he is going after his dad and supporting all the women who were sexually assaulted by his dad. That is the alternate universe best friend of the episode.
Oh, alternate universe.
So thank you for joining us. My name is Emily. You can find me on Instagram at EmilieBYoga or on my website, www.emiliebyoga.com.
And you can find me at quinn.com or at mindbodywithquinn or the basic NB on Instagram. Although I seem to be changing my handles, so go to quinn.com.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to change my handle soon too. So whatever, just keep listening to the podcast. If you are a fan of the pod and you want to support us, if you don't have monies because of capitalism, very real, then you can head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. That will make more people find our podcast, and it's also just really nice to read nice things about us. It's very good for our ego. And
also,
you can also
send the podcast to a friend who you think would like it.
Yeah, that's a great way to support us.
And also, if you head over to our Patreon, you can, for any amount of money, because we do not have tiers, you can support us financially at any amount and have access to all the benefits.
Yes, which include bi-weekly watch parties. We also have bonus materials up there. We also have other things going on.
And I also want to speak to all of our patrons here. Please go onto your Patreon account and put in your mailing address, because after 3 months of supporting us, no matter what amount you're supporting us with, we send you an exclusive Patreon What the Phalange logo sticker. And we can't do that unless you have your address there. So go do that and we will send you your stickers.
Great. Sounds great. Because we talked about like a lot of things this episode, we would love if you wrote into us, wtphalange@gmail.com. And hey, who knows? We might even read your email on our podcast. And if you do send us an email, be sure to include your pronouns so that when we refer to you in the episode, we refer to you properly. That being said, thank you so much for joining us today, and
keep deconstructing
and diversifying
the media you consume.